Good day, everyone. My name is Rosilito Tahor Ilustrisimo, and I'm going to discuss to you the continuation of Miss Junaline Ares' topic, which is stopping by woods on a snowy evening under the poetic devices and figurative languages. So before I continue my discussion, I would like to do some or a sort of recap. So, stopping by woods in a snowy evening is a poem by Robert Frost. And as we all know, that Robert Frost is one of the most popular American poets of all time. He wrote this poem in 1922 and published in 1923 in his New Hampshire volume. When you read this poem, you will notice and discover the personification, repetition, as considered as a prominent in the work. So, since senior high school, I already know Robert Frost because I've also encountered one of his um, wonderful or the most popular poem, which is The Road Not Taken. And this poem is so beautiful for me as a reader because I know what is the content of that poem. So, without further ado, let's continue the discussion. So, what are you waiting for? Let's begin. So, my topic starts with repetition. So, as you read the poem, the last stanza in this poem is the most powerful part of the poem. Not just that, the last two lines are the most celebrated lines in English poetry. The importance of these lines will be detailed in the analysis of the poem, but for now, let's try to focus on the repetition of the rhyme that adds a unique and powerful element to the poem and making it even more special. So, in the fourth verse, you will see there are lines repeated, which is and mouths to go before I sleep. So, sleep is the metaphor used for true rest, the rest of a fulfilled promise, of a fulfilled day, or even a fulfilled life. This is the only stanza of Stopping by the Woods on a Snowy Evening that consists of four rhyming lines due to the repetition of, just like what I've said, the and miles to go before I sleep. It repeated likely because there it gives us a signal that there is no next verse to continue the verse to verse rhyming pattern, because as you can see that in the first to the third stanza, you will notice the rhyming the rhyming scheme rather. The rhyming scheme can be measured in the first stanza will be A B A. The second stanza will be measured on B B C B. The third stanza is C C D C. However, in the fourth stanza, it will be measured by D D D D. Next is symbol. So throughout this piece, the poet engages with two primary symbols, which is the woods and the village. So they represent one side of two choices that the speaker has before them. They could head towards the woods or they could return to the modern obligations. The woods represent a freedom of sorts, liberated from the constraints of society, and without endless task everyday life demands on the average person. Society also means a village because just like what I've said, the village symbolizes the community, responsibility, or duty, which is opposite to the woods because the woods symbolizes as a radical freedom that is unencumbered by the normal rules or regulations of society. So there, one could live within the natural world and enjoy the peace nature has to offer. But it should be noted the woods are also dark and deep. They also represent darkness and present the speaker with the option of sleep, or as some have interpreted it, as death. Another thing, I also found out a sentence which is where it symbolizes something. It is the darkness evening of the year. If you interpreted it literally, kuan siya, makakata nga, muna pinakait ka ng ngit-ngit or niog nga kagabiun sa tibuok tuig. But, if we will interpreted it with the or connected to the content of the poem, we must say that this part or this sentence symbolizes the downfall of the speaker. He or she may feel that there is no hope anymore. Rather, it is a theme. Frost engages with themes of such as exhaustion, fatigue, depression, optimism, commitment, and death throughout this poem. His speaker feels out of place and out of time. He's completely alone in the world, at least at this moment, and the feeling of small sense of tranquility and isolation that only nature can bring. There are darker undertones to this poem as well. The suggestion of sleep has reminded some of death or suicide and the desire to escape the escape the responsibility of the society and permanently from the demands of everyday life. Additionally, the poet makes sure to remind the reader that life doesn't stop no matter how isolated from it a person is. It means this poem could be looked at as a simple commentary on life, a statement suggesting that if one stands around and watches his or her life for too long, one might lose it entirely. At the end of the poem, the narrator returns to their journey, looking forward to the conclusion of the darkest evening of the year and the sleep, or perhaps death, they've earned. In this poem, in the conclusion, it reminds us that as a human, we must make decision. And making decision, we must also consider the consequences of the decision we made. So let's proceed to the form, meter, and rhyme scheme. So first, let's talk about form. The poem features four quatrains written in a rubaiyat stanza form. Do you know what is rubaiyat? So rubaiyat features a chain rhyme scheme in which one rhyme from a stanza carries over into one rhyme from a stanza carries over into the next, creating an interlocking structure. A rubaiyat has no specified length, but in this case of Stopping by Woods in a Snowy Evening, the poem has four stanzas of 4 lines each, with each line made up of 4 iambic feet or beats. So, as we notice that within the 4 stanza, specifically in the first, second, and third stanza, we have noticed that the first, second, and fourth sentence of each stanza rhymes. But in the third sentence, it does not. That is why it is called a chain rhyme scheme. So let's proceed to the matter. This poem features perfect iambic tetrameter. Iambic tetrameter has four pairs of unstressed followed by stressed syllables. So let's say, for example, in the first sentence of the first stanza, whose woods these are, I think I know. So this is the perfect iambic tetrameter. The entire poem follows this unstressed, stressed metric pattern, which gives every line a controlled, precise feeling. The meter contributes to the feeling that the poem is meticulously crafted and perfectly whole. This is a very musical feeling to the iambic tetrameter, as if the entire poem could be sung or enchanted. This helps the reader focus on the thematic content of the poem without ever tripping over awkward lines. This especially feels evident that the final repeating lines, which seems almost like the chorus of lullaby. So, have you heard the horse throat? Do you know what is horse throat? Kana galing, murag dinaganan sa kabayo, like this. This poem can be sung or enchanted. So let's make for example. Whose woods these are, I think I know. Whose woods these are, I think I know. So that is it also called a musical feeling to the iambic tetrameter. So let's proceed to the rhyme scheme. The rhyme scheme of the poem follows a chain rhyme in which one rhyme from each stanza. So it can be measured as A, B, A, B, C, B, B, C, D, C, C, and lastly, D, 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 D. Every rhyme in the poem is perfect and contributing to the feeling of precision of craft that dominates the entire poem. As with the regular, steady meter and the sturdy and consistent rhymes make the poem read very easily and seem somewhat simpler than it actually is. Though it may uh, appear almost like a lullaby or a nursery rhyme, Frost is exploring deep metaphysical ideas of nature, freedom, and responsibility within these clear, precise lines. So the only deviation from this scheme, in the strictest sense, is the repetition of the final two lines, which causes the final two rhymes to be identical word sleep. This choice to use the same word twice for the final rhyme places a special significance on the idea of sleep, suggesting that it is thematic centrality to the poem and the speaker. In other words, rhyming sleep with itself suggests just how deeply tired the speaker is. Next is the speaker. So some people believe that the speaker of this poem is anonymous because it does not have specified gender. However, some readers and scholars have suggested that the speaker of the poem is Robert Frost himself. Frost experienced a similar moment to the narrator when he took a trip down to his local market and was largely unsuccessfully in making enough money to see his children through Christmas with the presents he wanted to buy them. But despite the compelling anecdote, without the clear evidence that the poet intended himself to be the narrator, it is important that the readers must look at the poem from an objective point of view. Because the narrator appears to be a traveler, a man or a woman, perhaps a traveling salesperson. Maybe they are also burdened with obligations and desire to abandon them all. But they are clear minded enough to see that society has rules one must follow. Lastly, the setting. As the title itself makes it clear that the poem is set in the woods on a snowy evening. In fact, it's the darkest evening of the year, which suggests that this might be the winter solstice. The speaker watches the snowfall far from any farmhouses or other signs of human life. As such, it's safe to assume that the speaker is pretty isolated and far out into the woods. More specifically, the speaker is between the woods and frozen lake, right? As you read the poem. The setting is also mostly silent, with the exception of the sound of wind and snowfall. Finally, the woods are expansive as evidenced in the description dark and deep. Together, these details establish the speaker's relative isolation as well as the fact that the speaker seems to exist in between space. The speaker is between the woods and the lake, between the nature and the civilization, between the decision to stay and linger or to move on and fulfill certain promises that the village or he has made in his society. So I think that would be all, and I hope you understand the topic well. So if you have any question, you can ask me. Thank you.